All right, so I recognize a lot of your faces. Perhaps you recognize my face. If you don't, it's Jacob Evans. So I preach not too terribly far from here at Pulaski Street, Church of Christ. As I think some of you know, this is Lawrenceburg's home. That was my home church, and been there for almost 11 years back preaching for them. It's already been 11 years. Um, and that means I'm kind of in territory with family. It's kind of how I met Patty, because Patty, he can lift weights, heavy. And I go to my cousin Charles, and who's also works with them on conditioning, but also the line and all that. So kind of through that connection, I met Patty at that point. In fact, tomorrow morning I'm gonna go and pump iron with my other cousin Mark. He'll bring his son, and we just have a little powwow, in the mornings. But it's been good. It's been good. I was on vacation last week, and I'm trying to keep the Heatherley's in business. I've sent them a lot of cars, and I've sent them the same car. It just been finicky, weird. But now all my cars are on the road. It's wonderful. You know, Hopefully they'll stay that way for a long time. So when I talked to Joey some time ago, he says we're going to talk about parenting, whatever you want to talk about parenting, raising children, and all that stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, um, I want to whatever I do. I'm like, I don't want to be guilty of saying a bunch of stuff you've heard before. Even in the last few weeks. My understanding is it's been pretty cool because everybody's got their own take and people doing different things. Somebody brought He-Man figures. Who was that? Corey Bell. He's not here tonight, right? No. But I heard Corey had a He-Man figure. I still got some He-Man figures, like straight 1982, the real He-Man figures. And they're at my house or my parents. It's at my mom's house. I'll get my hands on them, I'll tell you that. They're kind of cool. There was one that smelled like a skunk. You know what I'm talking about? It's like black and white. It smelled real bad one day. You did? It's awesome. And at one point I thought, okay, I was going to talk about, how parenthood isn't easy, and I thought we can go that route. And then there's a lesson I crafted some years ago on 6 gifts that you give your children that will last a lifetime. And I thought that would be good too. But I decided to go this way tonight, because it's something I've thought a lot about, especially in the last 5, 6 years. And um, and so tonight's going to be a warning. Okay. Um, some of you who might be young parents, some of you who might be looking to be parents, some of you still got some younger kids at home, whatever, or even older kids, frankly. Um, this lesson is going to be challenging. There, and here's why I know that, because it's challenged me personally, where I want to push back on some of what I'm thinking, and like there's gonna be some times like is this? I mean, really? Is this really an expectation of God? I mean, really? And I hope before it's over, you're gonna be like, oh wow, it is, and it's undeniable that there is something to be mindful of here and to seek to avoid here. Okay? Because if you don't, and I've got it general as idolizing family, our focus will be more on idolizing our children. Okay? But we'll get a little bit into the idolizing your spouse, along the way. Like, have you ever heard he worships the ground she walks on? Now we know what we mean by that, but did you know there's literally people who that's pretty much the deal. That they put another human being on the throne of their heart, and that not God, another human being. That could be a problem. Okay, so let me start with this. Um, does everybody know what the first of the Ten Commandments is? Know what it is? Yeah. thou shalt have no other gods before me. I'm going to be transparent here. For a long time, I thought that was an ancient problem. You know, like they were guilty of bowing down to wood, metal, and stone figures, right? They were guilty of doing some what we might consider here in the West to be kind of superstitious. I'm not going to have to worry about having no other gods before God because I just don't have an idol problem. It's interesting when you get into the New Testament. Um, the last sentence in First John, you go through that whole book, and this last sentence gets me every time because there was no discussion of this in the whole book, but the last sentence in First John, it's First John chapter 5, verse 21, you check me on this. You know what the last sentence says? Little children, keep yourselves from idols. Period. And I'm like, okay. Y'all remember when Jesus said you cannot serve two masters? Because you'll hate one, despise one, and you'll love and all of that. Y'all remember what he pitted against God in that little situation? He pitted mammon. What's that translated into, y'all? Money. Question. Do you think anybody's made money the center of their life in this culture or other cultures in the world? In fact, you get into Colossians chapter 3, about verse 5, it mentions covetousness. Some translations put greed there, and then it puts a comma, and then it says this, which is idolatry. It says that wanting more and more and more and more and more of what you have enough of already is idolatry. The thing that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to put someone or anything or anyone ahead of God. God, as we know, is supposed to be the be-all and the end-all. He's supposed to be the one that sits on the throne of our heart. It doesn't mean we can't love anybody else, we can't care about anything else, but he's got to be the one at the throne of your heart. And so there's been some books and some thinking on this that I've found very as challenging as anything I've ever studied. You know, under the umbrella of Christianity. Because for so long I thought that's an ancient problem, it's not a modern problem, right? That's a primitive problem, a superstitious kind of deal. It's not, we don't deal, but here's the deal. You just have to understand this. Anything can be an idol. Anything. It can be the desire for comfort. It can be ambition for success. It can be a political cause. It can be sports. You think anybody's made a religion out of sports? You think anybody's heart is more that their mood even is handled more by what happens on Saturday, not what happens on Sunday, right? I mean, we got people whose hearts are directed towards something else, but at the same time, not just can anything be an idol, anyone can be an idol. Anyone, even the person you love most in this world, can be the one that sits on the throne of your heart, not God. I'll give you an example. This is about spouse stuff. In the Old Testament, remember that Laban guy who pulls a little trick on Jacob? He thinks he's marrying Rachel, but he marries Leah. Now, does Jacob love Leah? He loves who? He loves Rachel. Question, did Leah love Jacob? Her first three children, their names translate to things like, now maybe my husband will love me. And then she finally learns her lesson, and she names her fourth child Judah, which basically is, I will now praise the Lord. But the first three children were all on her. She had, the love she needed and wanted from Jacob had become everything to her. And then she finally realized, I can't be fully satisfied. fully what I need to be as a person. I don't need to be trying to find my identity and my satisfaction and my security, ultimately speaking, in another human being. I need to be finding that in who? I need to be finding that in God. And I think it's interesting that it's Judah through whom God chooses to send who? The Messiah. Wasn't even one of Rachel's kids, his favorite wife. It was Leah. Judah. Right? You can mess up here. You can put something. You put your girlfriend or your boyfriend or we got a show called American Idol. And you better believe some people out there crazy enough to idolize in a bad way certain people with talent in some way, right? Or a sports figure, something of that nature. And what I want to challenge us with tonight, primarily, is that it is possible to idolize children. Um, and here's the thing that's weird about this. This is why this is going to be so challenging, y'all, is because in America and in the church, we view family as like this unquestioned good. And is family good? Like, if you're, a lot of more conservative politicians, what's some of the stuff they're going to make sure they want families to know? I'm pro what? Pro family, right? I want you to understand I care about your kids. So family, this is why this is so hard, because if you go, is family a good thing or a bad thing? And I know somebody like, well, it depends on who you're talking about, right, in my family. But we, as a concept, we place high value on family. In fact, if you were, let me ask you this, is the Bible pro-family? Well, yeah. I mean, who created family? God. God invented family. God created family. He has high expectations for family. We go back to the Ten Commandments. Do you know what one of the Ten Commandments is? Honor father and your mother. Paul's going to take that and use that in Ephesians chapter 6. And then he's going to also remind the children, not only do your parents, right? Not only do you have like a responsibility towards your parents, but parents, you got a responsibility towards your kids. Hey, husbands, you got a responsibility towards your wives. Wives, you got a responsibility towards your husbands. And, God intends for children to be born in a stable, loving environment, right, where they're supported. But Brent will tell you this, and anybody in the school system, unfortunately, not every child gets born into that situation. And they come to school with baggage that other kids don't have. But what is God's ideal? Right? We know that God in His Word is directing parents and children to be what they're supposed to be who they're supposed to be. So that, the outcomes, the chances for good outcomes and a better life, is going to have. The Proverbs are going to talk about raising children and the marriage relationship and things like that. Of course, there are some things in there that can upset you if you let it, right? Um, the nagging wife stuff, like incessant dripping. There's all this kind of thing. It'll get in there and take little stabs at things. But family is important. We all understand it's worth emphasizing. We all understand it's worth discussing. We all understand family's worth protecting. We get all that. But our love for our family, for our children, can morph, if we are not careful, into idolatry. And the first commandment, when Jesus asked, what's the greatest commandment? What did He say the greatest commandment was? Love the Lord your God. I'm paraphrasing, with everything you are. Now, the second's like it, but it is a second. And you're to love your neighbor as yourself, which is going to be inclusive of your family. But there's a tendency to do what? And this is a challenge, because has anybody in here ever seen God? Anybody ever wrapped your arms around God? Any of you ever had a back and forth conversation with God, like you're looking at Him and you're seeing facial expressions? And I haven't had that. But we're called to make that the highest priority in our life. But sometimes you do this stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with this book. This is C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. Um, he was a British author, famous for the Chronicles of Narnia, right? He also wrote a cool little book, Screwtape Letters, where he had like a senior demon telling a junior demon how to mess with people's lives. But it's kind of satire. It's very revealing. You know, if you ever heard a sermon, if I were the devil, this is what I would do. And sometimes it's not just, it's like, if I can just crank you this way, just a little bit, I got you, right? So he also wrote Mere Christianity, which is a book that probably, it's one of those books that's a classic, probably every Christian needs to read at some point, right? But he wrote this book too, and it's different. He's in the book he boards a bus for heaven. I was going to use his imagination, so understand. He is not trying to bring out some theology on salvation. You just got to go with it because he's got some things he's wanting to emphasize and to wrestle with in this book. He wants his readers to deal with as well, right? So in this book, um, Lewis climbs into a bus with a group of fellow ghosts who have finished their earthly lives, okay? And they're going to be dropped off at a kind of way station in which they will make their decisions about eternity. Okay? And for each newcomer, there is this bright, shining figure who steps out of heaven to receive his or her old friend. So it's somebody that died before you that's going to come and kind of help you through the rest of the journey. And on this occasion, you got Pam, and she is disappointed to see that the person that was appointed to come and help her on this occasion was Reginald, her brother, because she wanted it to be her son, Michael. Her expectation was that her son, Michael, would be the one to greet her there and take her on up in, to heaven. And Reginald explains that she isn't ready for that yet, that she must first be eager to seek God himself, and then all the wonderful blessings of heaven will be available to her. God isn't simply just a way to get to heaven. Heaven is the way to get to who? God. And Pam, he says, must approach it that way. Reginald says, I'm afraid the first step's the hard one, but after that you'll go in like a house on fire when you learn to want someone else besides Michael. And Pam doesn't know what her younger brother's talking about. She says, well, never mind. I'll do whatever's necessary. The sooner I begin, the sooner they'll let me see my boy. Reginald says you can't begin with that kind of attitude. You're treating God only as a means to Michael, he points out. She must learn to want God for his own sake. He can't come second in her affections, and he can't even be tied for first. Here's what Reginald says. You exist as Michael's mother only because you first exist as God's creature. This is an interesting point, right? Would you have any of the relationships that you have that you love and cherish that have blessed you in all kinds of different ways if you weren't first the creation of God? And he says that relation is older and closer. And he goes on to explain to Pam that human beings can't make one another really happy for long. You can't love a fellow creature fully till you love God. And it becomes clear that Pam's love for her son was something of an obsession in her life. After the boy died, she kept his room just as he left it for 10 years, which happens. But here's the thing. She neglected her other children. She had other children. She neglected all of them. She neglected her husband. She pushed her parents away to the pain and disappointment of everyone. And all of this was sacrificed on the altar of her adoration for her departed son. Here's what she says. No one has a right to come between me and my son, not even God. It's very clear that this woman is set on this view that nothing's going to change her mind. Her child, not God, sits on the throne of her heart. Some people, as you might imagine, are uncomfortable with C.S. Lewis's little digit actor. Right? They're like, shouldn't God give her credit for this powerful love that she has for her son? At least she loved someone, and it just happened to be her own son here, right? And what could be more noble than a mother's love for her son? What could be more noble than that? That's a good thing, right? I mean, don't you see where this is challenged? You're like, well, why are we upset that she loved her son? The problem, as Reginald, her brother, put it, is that the relationship with God must be recognized as older and closer. Picture it this way. Picture your life as a bicycle wheel. Okay? Every spoke in the wheel represents different and significant relationships that make up your life. Okay? So one spoke represents your mom or your dad, or maybe it's a grandmother or grandfather or some guardian in your right, whoever that sort of mentor, parental figure might be. One of the spokes is your spouse, maybe it's a boyfriend or girlfriend. One of the spokes, or a few of them, might be your siblings. One of the spokes, or a few of the spokes, might be your children. You have children, right? So on and so forth. Our tendency, a lot of people's tendency, is to make God just one of the spokes, along with what? All the other spokes that we got in our life. But where do y'all think God wants to be in this picture? He wants to be the hub. He wants to be the middle thing from which all of our relationships are informed, all of our relationships blossom, right? That he gets the first place. And then that has a profound effect on the way we relate and we react and we deal with the various relationships that are in our life. But that's where all this stuff speaks. Our relationship with the Father is more basic to who we are and to why we have been created. We are intended to love our children and our parents and our siblings and our spouses wholeheartedly, but always in the context of our primary foundational love for God. And this is why in Lewis's story, the mother had to find a primary love for God before she could be allowed to see her son or anyone else in heaven. As things stood, she had made something beautiful, a mother's love for her child, into an idol that distorted all her other relationships. Psalm 127, 3-5. Look at this. Behold, children are heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward, like heirs in the hand of a warrior, the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. So children, good thing, right? They're a good thing. We love our children. Sometimes we might think love is not a strong enough word in order to perhaps describe what it is we feel toward our children. But we have to be careful that we don't find more of our identity in being a parent to that child than we find in being a child of God. Notice that Solomon says that children are heritage from the Lord. In other words, children are gifts from God. And I find this has been helpful for me. What I'm about to tell you is very applicable to a lot of the potential idols in our life. Okay? Very, very helpful. So many of the things that human beings idolize are things that God gave us to bless us in the first place. And so one of the primary things you have to do is you have got to work to always see the giver in the gift. Right? That we are, in fact, recognizing, remembering, not forgetting that children that bring joy to our lives and sometimes frustration, which helps us grow, frankly, right? I mean, there's a lot of you parents say, I'm not the same person now that I was before I had children, because my children have affected my life in profound ways. I mean, they have a way of exposing perhaps that, oh, I thought I didn't have a temper, right? And I thought I was pretty chill. And then these little ones come into my life, and I'm like, I'm losing my mind, right? I mean, they refine you in a way, right? They force you to have difficult conversations with yourself after you blew up, like, I probably should not have reacted that way. Then maybe your spouse comes along, you probably shouldn't have reacted that way, right? Well, let's talk it out. Let me apologize. What am I going to do here? So, children are gifts from God. And what a slap in the face it is when we forget that. We take the gift and supplant the giver with the gift. When I say this, I'm telling you, I know this is challenging stuff. Let me give you some what I call the fallout of family idolatry. So this helps us understand that, and you got to understand this. Not only does making someone else and functionally your God, okay, and not God, making someone else and not God your God certainly hurts your relationship with God, but it also hurts the person that you have made an idol. Okay? This is going to show you that. All right? So, unrealistic expectations. Have you ever considered the sheer pressure of asking someone to be God for you? We're essentially telling someone, I'm placing all of my happiness, all of my hope, and all of my well-being in your hands. Now, whose hands should we be placing those things in? God. But no, what you've done is you've decided, I'm going to get me a human being, and I'm going to place all of that in their hands. And so the husband does this when he places his wife on that pedestal of his heart. She is his whole world. And if she's in a good mood, he's in a good mood. But she soon begins to feel the burden of responsibility for his what? His ultimate happiness. Or you got the doting wife who simply feels she is maximizing her marriage and she's being the adoring wife. But when she crosses the line from proper love to idolatry, she places a terrible strain on the marriage. Right? He can't have a bad day. He can't miss filling any need that she has. If he does, then it seems that her marriage is falling apart. There's a book called Counterfeit Gods, written by the late Tim Keller. And in that book, he makes a statement that, I mean, should have been obvious, but the way he put it just had a profound effect. He said, no child can bear the full weight of godhood. Here's what happens. One of two things happen when a parent makes an idol out of their child. So you have some parents that their identity, their reason for existing is wrapped up in that child and in the behavior of that child, and the fact that that child succeeds, and the fact that that child does the best, and all of this kind of stuff. And so there's a tendency for parents who've idolized their children that way to over-discipline them. like to go too far. Why? Because I don't need you making mistakes. So much of who I am, what I'm about, is wrapped up in you. And so they parent with a heavy hand because they need this child to be perfect so that they can feel perfect and well, accomplished, and all of those things. But this can also go another way too. You can have some parents who desire the love and the friendship of that child. See how this goes a little different way? So what's the tendency here? Woefully under-discipline the child. Why? Because if I discipline them, they're not going to like it. And they're going to be mad at me. And that, I can't have that. I can't have, my child's got to love me, and I got to get everything I can. You guys know parents that like you got some little league parents that their kids are that are there's this immense amount of pressure and weight on them because this parent is literally living through this child. And let me tell you, idolizing a child will crush him or her, whether she's 6, 16, 26, 36, 46, 56, 60. Counselors will tell you, they have so many adults who are at one time little children in their formative years and all this stuff. You know what so many of them say? I could never make my parents what? Could never make them happy. I'm telling you guys, I'm not saying this is the be all of the end all. I'm just saying there are some fundamental problems in a lot of the marriages and children-parent relationships where one of the problems that's going on that nobody sees or nobody's talking about is that somebody made an idol out of somebody. They're looking for all kinds of things from an individual that ultimately only God can give them that. And only God can give them that, right? So, unreachable expectations, right? Unreachable expectations. Here you go. Inevitable disappointment. If you make a God out of someone who isn't God, what's going to happen? If you make a God out of someone who isn't God, are they ultimately going to be able to deliver in all the ways that matter most? In the ultimate sense, they are not. So what are you doing here? You're setting yourself up for disappointment. This is one of the weird things that I learned about kind of idolatry in a modern context is people are idolizing things. Like you'll see people idolize their career. That's where they're looking to get all their satisfaction. It's where they're getting their identity. It's where they're getting their sense of security. It's where they're getting their sense of fulfillment. All of those things that ultimately are supposed to rest in God, they're trying to get it out of this thing. And they pretend that this thing can actually deliver those things. And what it ends up being, idolatry is a bounced check. And here's the really weird thing. Guess who wrote the check that bounced? You did. You wrote a check to yourself, really. And it bounced. And you're the one that wrote it to yourself. And you're like, that's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. You get into Isaiah, and you get into the Old Testament prophets, and they're talking about idolatry, the Psalms. What do they often say about it? You guys are worshiping something that can't hear, can't see, can't talk, can't listen, can't reason. Are you guys crazy? Right? If you turn anything or anyone into an idol, turn anything into your functional God who isn't God, you are making a very big mistake. But it happens all the time, right? It happens all the time. And then let me Let me share this with you. Lamentable, like this, it is something worth lamenting. And it's possible that there are examples of this in here where you are a Christian today, but in becoming a Christian, you had to go against your parents or some very influential person in your life. Okay? But for every instance of where that happens, right? Those that have come to idolize their family in some way, that they are the be all and the end all, they are the ones, then here comes the opportunity to obey God. But they choose what? Not to obey God for fear of what? Upsetting their family. Because at the end of the day, their family is more important. What their family thinks is more important than what the God of the universe thinks. Now that's tough. What would y'all think about a church that put this on their sign out? Do you think the people are going to be knocking the doors down? Do you think they're going to find you to be quite weird? Like we've got a sign about that big out in front of Platt Street. What if we had a sign that said our mission sometimes involves turning fathers against their sons and turning daughters against their mothers, and vice versa? Imagine this. Imagine if somebody they come in here and they want to place membership here at Midway. You have your leadership, okay, whatever form that takes. Okay. And what if you had two or three elders, and periodically they kind of take stock of the congregation, and then maybe they pull you in and go, listen, we're concerned that your devotion and love for your family is eclipsing your love and your devotion to God. Wouldn't that be weird? I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know of an eldership that's ever had a meeting like that. Maybe somewhere at some time. But why do I bring this up? Well, I want you to consider these words from Jesus. Are you ready? Matthew 10, listen to this. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own, this is Luke 14:26. We'll get to Matthew 10 in just a second. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Or consider these words. Do not think that I've come to bring peace to the earth. I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I've come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those of his own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. I mean, isn't that what that's saying? I mean, I'll tell you right now, if we put that sign out front for our churches, it would be in the Advocate Democratic Union. It would be WLX would have us on Facebook. This church. You imagine the comments. People would just be like, that church is weird, man. I mean, can you believe it, right? Can you believe it? Now, I don't want us to misinterpret these passages. Jesus is not really discussing any lack of love and care and devotion for your family. He's highlighting the centrality and the sheer magnitude of our love for and our devotion for God. Y'all have heard the phrase, having your blood thicker than water. You know what I mean by that, right? I got my friends and my acquaintances, well, that's the water. But it comes down to it, I'm sticking with the blood because that's my family. The way I love to think about these passages is that Jesus in these passages is saying, there is something thicker than blood. There's something thicker than blood. What is that? According to Jesus, that's our love and our devotion to Him. That gets to be the be-all and the end-all. That's who we have to stick with, even if it's a mama or a daddy or a son that's trying to push us in the other direction or prevent us from going in the direction God wants us to go. That's difficult. That's tough. All right, I know we got to be done. So, last thing, y'all ready? Last thing, I got a picture for you. What do you think about this picture? All right, somebody tell me what we're looking at as far as the depiction is concerned. Abraham and I. Now, this story is about to hit you like maybe it happened before because of what we've been talking about. This is probably one of the most harrowing stories in the whole Bible, right? Genesis chapter 22. It's the story of Abraham and Isaac, and it's a story that asks us, what if we were asked to prove that our love and commitment to God is greater than anything or anyone? Y'all know the story. You know it well. Most of you do. You know what God asks you to do. I want you to take your son, your only son, whom you love, and I want you to go up to Mount Moriah, and I want you to sacrifice your son, the son you love, your only son, I want you to sacrifice. Now, if you have not given God primary place in your heart, what are you going to do? Are you going up on that mountain? Are you getting anywhere near that mountain? And here's what's crazy. Y'all want to know one of the most maligned stories in the Bible is? You got unbelievers and skeptics that take this story and like, this is the most ludicrous thing we've ever seen in our life. This is so ridiculous that God would ask a man to sacrifice his son. Gets there. He ties that boy down. Eventually reaches for the knife. Never falters. Verse 12, do not lay your hand on the boy. Do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from him. Question, did Isaac sit on the throne of Abraham's heart? No. God did. Now here's a cool thing to think about. God has never and will never require human sacrifice as an act of worship. But I do wonder how I would fare if I were transplanted into Abraham's situation with one of my sons and I'm asked to go up there, right? Do this. And then naturally you got to ask yourself, who really sits on the throne of my heart? Because I'm telling you, if we're who are we most tempted to probably put on the throne of our heart besides a spouse? It's probably going to be a what? Probably going to be a child. Now, there's a postscript to this story. It's pretty awesome. It kind of shows the poetry and symmetry of history. Abraham lived in Beersheba, a small oasis in the desert. God sent him on a 3-day journey to Mount Moriah, which is quite a hike, by the way. Well, why did he do that? Well, after this story, about 1,000 years passed. And according to 2 Chronicles 3, the king of Israel, David, bought a little acreage to build, altar, and worship God. It was the place of Abraham's near sacrifice of Isaac. And then on that property, Solomon would build the great temple of Jerusalem. Another 1,000 years passed. And on this land, once again, a father was poised to sacrifice his son. This time it was no test. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? What God asked of Abraham, but did not finally require, He was willing to do himself for the love of you. On one side was his own beloved Son, sinless and perfect, and then on the other side was you and me, entangled in all the sin that makes us undeserving of whatever blessing he might give us. The only way he could have be reconciled was by way of sacrifice, and God so loved the world that he gave his what? He gave his only Son. Now, you and I are asked to choose God, to make him the object of our worship, our faith, our hope, and our devotion. But know this, when he had in this moment to choose between his Son, you and me, he chose us. Isn't it weird that one of the reasons we are drawn to the Father and the Son is precisely because they are the Father and the Son. The Father gave up the Son. We understand this family thing. We get this family thing, right? We get it. Most people that get it, right? Most people that get God. Because they're like, I can't believe you do that for me. Right? And it's so funny because we're like, I can't believe Abraham would go up on that mountain and do that. This is hard. And this is difficult stuff. It's not popular stuff. Because people don't want to think about who's really sitting on the throne of heart. But it's worth doing. It's worth thinking a lot about. Not just in the context of relationship, but in the context of anything. Is there someone that's sitting in the place of God functionally in my life? And if you're tempted to think, I don't think God really is that. I don't think God really thinks this is a big deal. Think again. Think of him. Right? Think of Esau. This evening, perhaps you're not in a position necessarily to come forward, but in your own heart and life, you got some things to think about, work through. If you want some other information on stuff, or want to think about this more, let me know. I'll get you some stuff to, help you wrestle with this a little more. But maybe you need prayers. Maybe you need to just have a conversation. I'm an open book. Okay. Maybe you're here and you're ready to dedicate your life to God for the first time. I don't know. It's possible. We can help you, accommodate you in any way. Come now with a gun and stand.